My parents spent the entire drive explaining why they'd booked me the cheapest room for their anniversary trip. But when the manager offered my family a presidential suite and addressed me as owner, their whole view of me changed. The Malibu Grand Resort stretched along 3 miles of pristine California coastline, its Mediterranean-style architecture gleaming white against the azure Pacific. Palm trees swayed in the ocean breeze, and the infinity pools seemed to blend seamlessly with the horizon. It was by any measure one of the most exclusive luxury destinations on the West Coast, which made the conversation happening in the passenger seat of my rental car all the more ironic. "Now, Emma, I need to prepare you for your accommodation," Mom said, turning around from the front seat to look at me with that expression of motherly concern I'd grown accustomed to over the past few years. "We booked you the cheapest room since money's tight for you. It's still nice. This is a 5-star resort, but it's not oceanfront like ours." I smiled from the back seat where I sat next to my younger brother, Jake. "That's thoughtful of you, Mom." "We looked at getting you an ocean view, too," Dad added, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel as we wound up the resort's palm-lined entrance drive. "But those rooms were $800 a night. We figured you'd prefer to save the money." $800 a night, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "Exactly. For a weekend getaway. That's just not practical for someone in your situation," Mom continued. "Your room was only $300, which is much more reasonable." My situation. At 28, I'd somehow become the family charity case, in their minds the daughter who chose creativity over stability and was presumably struggling as a result. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering I was looking at a property that I'd purchased 2 years ago for $340 million. "The important thing is we're all together for your anniversary," I said diplomatically. 30 years of marriage deserves a celebration." 30 wonderful years, Dad said, reaching over to squeeze Mom's hand. Richard and Helen Thompson had met in college, built a comfortable life together in suburban Phoenix, and raised 3 children while Dad grew his accounting practice into a small but successful firm. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable, happy, and deeply committed to family. "I still can't believe we're actually staying here," my older sister Claire said from the front passenger seat. "This place is incredible. Look at those pools." Claire was 32, married to a software engineer named Brad, and worked as a high school principal. She and Brad had saved for 2 years to afford this weekend, and I could hear the excitement in her voice as she took in the resort's opulence. Dad really outdid himself. Jake agreed. At 25, he was just starting his career as a physical therapist and living in a tiny apartment in Denver. This trip probably represented a significant splurge for him, too. "Your father has been planning this for months," Mom said proudly. "He wanted somewhere special to celebrate. And when we saw the photos of this place online, it looked like paradise," Dad finished. Even if it is costing us our vacation budget for the next 3 years, I felt a familiar pang of guilt. My family was stretching their finances to celebrate at a resort I owned. Staying in rooms they saw as expensive, while I knew the true cost of operations made every room profitable at any rate above $150 per night. But they had no idea about my real financial situation, and I'd worked very hard to keep it that way. "Emma, are you sure you can afford your share of the expenses this weekend?" Mom asked, her voice gentle but concerned. "We know things have been tight since you moved to Los Angeles." "Things have been tight" was their interpretation of my lifestyle choices. I lived in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, drove a 5-year-old Honda, and worked from home doing what they understood to be freelance graphic design. What they didn't understand was that my freelance work was actually running Thompson Hospitality Group, a luxury resort and hotel chain that I'd built from nothing over the past 6 years. "I can manage my share," I said quietly. "We're not judging, sweetheart," Dad added quickly. "We know creative careers can be unpredictable. If you need help with any expenses this weekend, just say the word." "Thanks, Dad." The valet stand came into view as we rounded the final curve of the entrance drive. Young men in crisp white uniforms stood ready to assist guests, and I could see the familiar faces of several employees I'd worked with during my quarterly property visits. I'd need to be careful not to let on that I knew any of them. "Would you look at this service?" Claire marveled as a valet approached our rental car. "They have more staff than guests. That's how you know it's a quality establishment," Mom said approvingly. "Proper attention to detail." If only she knew that I'd personally approved the staffing levels and service standards that impressed her so much. The Malibu Grand operated with a 3:1 staff-to-guest ratio, which was one of the highest in the industry. It was also one of the reasons the property commanded premium rates and maintained occupancy levels above 95% year-round. "Good afternoon and welcome to the Malibu Grand," the head valet said as we climbed out of the car. "Checking in today, Thompson party," Dad said proudly. We have reservations for the weekend. Excellent. Miguel will take care of your luggage, and the front desk is straight ahead through the main lobby. As we walked toward the entrance, I noticed Mom taking mental notes of every detail. The perfectly manicured landscaping, the gleaming marble floors, the fresh orchids in every arrangement. She was clearly excited to be staying somewhere so luxurious, which made me both happy and sad. Happy that she was enjoying the experience. Sad that she had no idea her daughter had created this experience specifically for guests like her. The lobby of the Malibu Grand was designed to take your breath away. And judging by my family's expressions, it was working. Soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the ocean view, comfortable seating areas arranged around a massive fireplace, and the kind of understated elegance that whispered rather than shouted about luxury. This is incredible, Jake said, spinning slowly to take it all in. Emma, have you ever stayed anywhere this nice once or twice, I said, which was technically true. I'd stayed here probably 50 times over the past 2 years, usually in the penthouse suite while overseeing property improvements or meeting with the management team. Well, don't get too used to it, Mom said with a laugh. This is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience for our family. We approached the front desk where 3 guest services representatives stood ready to assist. I recognized all of them, particularly Sarah Martinez, the guest services manager who'd been with the property since before I purchased it. I caught her eye briefly and gave an almost imperceptible shake of my head, hoping she'd understand not to acknowledge me. Good afternoon, Sarah said professionally. Welcome to the Malibu Grand. How may I assist you? Thompson party, Dad said, pulling out his confirmation email. We have 3 rooms reserved for the weekend. Of course, Mr. Thompson. Let me pull up your reservation. Sarah's fingers flew over her keyboard and I could see her processing the information. I have you and Mrs. Thompson in an oceanfront junior suite, Mr. and Mrs. Bradley Thompson in a garden view room, Mr. Jake Thompson in a standard room. And she paused, looking at her screen with slight confusion. Miss Emma Thompson in a standard room as well. That's correct, Mom confirmed, though we were hoping Emma's room might be close to ours if possible. Sarah's confusion deepened as she looked at her screen, then at me, then back at her screen. I knew what she was seeing. The system automatically flagged my name and typically upgraded any reservation associated with me to the penthouse level, but she was professional enough not to say anything immediately. Let me just verify a few details, Sarah said, typing quickly. I could practically see her internal debate playing out on her face. That's when James Wellington, the hotel's general manager, emerged from the back office. James was a hospitality veteran I'd recruited from the Ritz-Carlton 2 years ago, offering him a significant salary increase and equity stake to oversee the Malibu Grand. He was brilliant at his job, which made the recognition in his eyes as he saw me all the more problematic. Miss Thompson, James said, approaching our group with his characteristic warm smile. Welcome back. Shall I prepare the penthouse as usual? The silence that followed was deafening. I'm sorry. What Mom asked weakly. James looked confused, glancing between me and my family. Miss Thompson. Emma, we weren't expecting you until next month for the quarterly review, but of course we're delighted to have you here for the weekend. Quarterly review. Dad's voice was barely audible. James, I said quickly, this is my family. They're staying here for my parents' anniversary weekend. Oh. James's face lit up with understanding. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, what an honor to meet Emma's parents. And this must be Claire and Jake. Emma talks about you all constantly. You know my daughter, Mom asked, looking back and forth between James and me. Yo her. James laughed. Miss Thompson owns the Malibu Grand. She owns our entire resort chain. Actually, Thompson Hospitality Group. Surely you knew that? The lobby seemed to tilt around us. I watched my family's faces go through a series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and something that might have been recognition. Emma owns this hotel, Claire whispered. This hotel and 17 others, James confirmed proudly. The Thompson Hospitality Group is one of the fastest-growing luxury resort companies in North America. Emma built it from nothing in just 6 years. From nothing, Dad repeated slowly. Well, almost nothing. James continued, clearly not understanding that he was revealing information my family had never heard before. Emma started with that one small bed and breakfast in Napa Valley, then expanded to James I, interrupted gently. Maybe we could continue this conversation later. My family is here to celebrate my parents' anniversary. Of course. Forgive me. He turned to my parents with renewed enthusiasm. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, as Emma's parents, you are our most honored guests. Sarah, please move the Thompson party to our finest accommodations immediately. That's not necessary, Mom said faintly. Oh, but it absolutely is, James insisted. Emma, should I prepare the presidential suite for your parents and the executive oceanfront suites for Claire and Jake? Mom, Dad, I said carefully. Why don't we get you settled in your room first and then we can talk? But Dad wasn't moving. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Emma, do you actually own this resort? I own this resort and 17 others across California, Arizona, Colorado, and Hawaii, I said quietly. Thompson Hospitality Group is my company. Your company, Jake repeated in a daze, which I built over the past 6 years, starting with a small property in Napa that I bought with savings from my previous job. Previous job? Claire asked weakly. I worked in hotel management for Marriott right out of college. I saved every penny for 4 years, learned the business inside and out, then bought a failing bed and breakfast for $800,000. $800,000, Mom whispered, which I turned into a boutique luxury property, then used the profits to buy the next property and the next one until I'd built what you see today. James was beaming with pride. Emma's properties are consistently rated among the top luxury resorts in their respective markets. The company's annual revenue exceeds $400 million. Fund $100 million, Dad said, sitting down heavily in one of the lobby's leather chairs. This year we're projecting $470 million, I corrected. But James, my family doesn't need to hear the business details right now. Of course not, he said, though he was clearly excited to talk about the company's success. Sarah, let's get the Thompson family upgraded immediately. Emma, will you be staying in the penthouse? I'll stay wherever my family is comfortable with me staying. The penthouse it is. Then Sarah, move everyone to the top floor. The Thompson family deserves our finest accommodations. As Sarah worked on the computer frantically rearranging reservations and upgrades, my family continued to stare at me in various states of shock. I need to sit down, Mom said, joining Dad in the nearby seating area. I need to process this. Take your time, I said, sitting across from them. I know this is a lot. A lot. Claire sat down too, her voice rising slightly. Emma, you've been letting us worry about your finances for years while you secretly owned a hotel empire. I wasn't secretly owning anything. I just didn't advertise it. You let us think you were struggling, Jake said, his voice a mixture of hurt and amazement. Mom and Dad have been worried sick about your career, your finances, your future. I know, I said softly, and I'm sorry about that. But why, Mom asked, tears starting to form in her eyes. Why let us think you were barely getting by? When I'm successful, I finished. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I've achieved. Because I wanted to build something that was completely mine without anyone being able to say I succeeded because of family money or connections. We don't have money or connections in the hotel industry, Dad pointed out. Exactly. Which is why I knew that whatever I built would be entirely my own accomplishment. Sarah approached our seating area with a set of key cards. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I've moved you to the presidential suite on the top floor. Mr. and Mrs. Bradley Thompson, you're in the executive ocean suite. Mr. Jake Thompson, you're in the deluxe ocean suite. And Miss Thompson, the penthouse is ready for you. The penthouse, Claire said numbly, accepting her key card. It's our finest accommodation, James explained proudly. 3 bedrooms, private infinity pool, dedicated staff, panoramic ocean views. Emma designed many of the amenities herself. You designed hotel amenities, Dad asked. I've been involved in every aspect of the business, I said. Property acquisition, renovation, design, operations, marketing, staffing. When you own the company, you learn everything. And the bed and breakfast in Napa, Mom asked. That was real. The Vineyard House, I still own it, though it's much different now than when I bought it. Completely renovated, expanded. Now it's a 20-room boutique resort that books out a year in advance. 20 rooms, Jake repeated. The Malibu Grand has 180 rooms and suites, James added helpfully. It's our flagship property. Dad was shaking his head slowly. Our daughter owns the flagship property of a $400 million hotel company. Our daughter, who we booked into the cheapest room because we thought she couldn't afford anything better, Mom added, starting to laugh despite her tears. To be fair, you couldn't have known, I said gently. I worked very hard to make sure you wouldn't know. But why, Claire asked again, why hide something this incredible? I looked around the lobby of the hotel I'd purchased, renovated, and turned into one of the premier luxury destinations on the West Coast. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see guests enjoying the pools, the beach, the gardens that I'd personally approved. This was my world, my creation, my life's work. But for 6 years, I'd kept it separate from my family because I'd been afraid they'd see me differently. Because I was 22 when I bought my first property, I said finally. I was young, inexperienced, and terrified. I didn't want family expectations or opinions or advice. I needed to figure it out on my own. And you did figure it out, Dad said proudly. You built something extraordinary. But at what cost, Mom asked. You've been essentially living a double life for years. Not a double life, just a private one. Emma Claire said seriously, we've been worried about you constantly. Every family dinner, every phone call, we talk about how concerned we were about your career prospects, your financial stability, your future. I know, and I hated that you were worried, but I also knew that if I told you about the business, everything would change. You'd start giving me advice, connecting me with people you thought could help, treating me like a successful businesswoman instead of just Emma. You are a successful businesswoman, Jake pointed out, but I'm also still your sister. Still the person who puts ketchup on everything and cries at commercials and calls Mom every Sunday to complain about dating. You complain about dating to a woman who thought you couldn't afford to go on dates. Mom said James had been listening to this exchange with growing understanding. Emma, would you like me to give you and your family some privacy? I can have the concierge staff handle any needs you might have. That would be great, James. And thank you for being so professional about this situation. Of course, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, again, welcome to the Malibu Grand. Please don't hesitate to contact me personally if there's anything we can do to make your anniversary celebration perfect. After James left, we sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching other guests move through the lobby, enjoying the space I'd created. So Dad said, eventually what happens now? Now you know the truth, and hopefully we can enjoy your anniversary weekend without any more surprises. Any more surprises? Claire laughed. Emma, you've just revealed that you're a multi-millionaire hotel mogul. I think we've hit our surprise quota for the decade. Multi-millionaire. I considered this. I suppose that's technically accurate. How multi-millionaire, Jake asked. I pulled out my phone and opened my net worth tracking app, something I checked religiously but had never shown to another person. As of this morning, my personal net worth is $127 million. The business is valued at approximately $890 million, but I only own 73% of it since I brought in investors for expansion capital. The silence that followed was absolute $127 million, Mom whispered. Personal net worth not including business assets. And you've been living in that tiny apartment in Santa Monica, Claire said. It's not tiny, it's efficient. And it's actually a penthouse with an ocean view. But yes, I live modestly because I prefer simplicity. You prefer simplicity, Dad repeated. You own 18 luxury resorts and you prefer simplicity. The resorts are for guests who want luxury. I'm not a guest. I'm the owner. I need efficiency, not opulence. But you could have anything, Jake said. Literally anything you wanted. I have everything I want. I built a business I'm passionate about, creating experiences that make people happy. I have financial security, professional respect, and work that challenges me every day. And a family who had no idea what you'd accomplished, Mom added sadly. A family who loved me even when they thought I was struggling. That's actually pretty special. Dad stood up and walked over to where I was sitting. Emma, I owe you an apology. We all do. For what? For not seeing what you were building. For not understanding that your choices were leading somewhere incredible. For treating you like you needed our help when you'd actually become more successful than any of us imagined. Dad, you don't need to apologize for caring about my welfare. But I do need to apologize for not trusting your judgment. You clearly knew what you were doing, even when it didn't look that way to us. Mom joined Dad next to my chair. Sweetheart, I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. Not because of the money, but because you followed your vision and built something meaningful and you did it all on your own, Claire added. That's actually incredible. I had help along the way, mentors, advisors, employees, partners, but yes, I built it from nothing. Which brings us back to the original question. Jake said, what happens now? I looked around at my family. These people who had raised me, supported me, worried about me, and loved me unconditionally. They knew my secret now, and the world hadn't ended. If anything, I felt lighter than I had in years. Now we go to your rooms, get settled, and celebrate Mom and Dad's 30th anniversary at one of the finest resorts in California, I said, which happens to be mine, but that's just a fun bonus. A fun bonus, Claire repeated, shaking her head in amazement. And tonight we'll have dinner at the resort's signature restaurant, where I'll finally be able to order the good wine without worrying about whether you think I can afford it. The good wine, Mom said, starting to smile. How good are we talking? We have a wine cellar with bottles worth more than most people's cars. I think we can find something appropriate for your anniversary. Our daughter, the wine connoisseur, Dad said proudly. Your daughter, the hotel owner who learned about wine because her guests expect exceptional wine service. As we rode the elevator to the top floor, I realized that keeping my success secret hadn't protected my family from anything. It had just prevented them from sharing in the joy of what I'd built. They were proud of me, not because I was wealthy, but because I'd followed my dreams and succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Emma, Mom said as the elevator reached the penthouse level. Can I ask you one more question? Of course. Are you happy? Really, truly happy with the life you've built? I thought about my daily routine, reviewing operational reports from 18 properties, working with architects and designers on new projects, traveling to oversee renovations and expansions, meeting with investors and partners to plan the company's growth. It was demanding, sometimes overwhelming, but absolutely exhilarating. I wake up every morning excited about the challenges I'll face that day. I said I love creating experiences that make people happy, building businesses that employ hundreds of people, and pushing myself to achieve things I never thought possible. So yes, I'm incredibly happy. Then that's all that matters, she said, hugging me as the elevator doors opened. Everything else is just details. Details like owning 18 luxury resorts, details like having a daughter who built something extraordinary and is generous enough to share it with her family. The penthouse was exactly as I'd left it during my last visit. 3,000 square feet of elegant living space with panoramic ocean views, a private infinity pool, and every amenity a guest could desire. My family wandered through the rooms with expressions of awe, taking in the handcrafted furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcase the California coastline. This is your regular room when you stay here? Jake asked, standing on the private terrace overlooking the Pacific. This is my home away from home when I'm working at this property, though I usually spend more time in the business center than in the luxury amenities. Business center. I converted one of the bedrooms into an office. Running 18 properties requires a lot of coordination. 18 properties that you own, Claire said, still processing. Emma, do you realize what you've accomplished? You're 28 years old and you've built a hospitality empire. I've built a good business, I corrected, but it's still growing. We're looking at expansion opportunities in Florida and New York. Expansion opportunities? Dad repeated, laughing. Our little girl is talking about expansion opportunities. Your little girl grew up, I said gently, and she wanted to make sure her parents had the perfect place to celebrate 30 years of marriage. Mission accomplished, Mom said, looking out at the view. This is absolutely perfect. As the sun set over the Pacific that evening, we gathered for dinner at the resort's signature restaurant, where I was finally able to be completely honest about who I was and what I'd built. We ordered the chef's tasting menu paired with wines from the collection I'd personally curated and talked late into the night about business, family dreams, and the unexpected paths that lead us to where we're meant to be. To Mom and Dad, I said, raising my glass of 1998 Dom Perignon, who taught me that success isn't about what you achieve, but about who you become in the process of achieving it. To Emma, Dad replied, who achieved more than we ever dreamed possible and stayed exactly who we raised her to be. To family, Mom added, and to daughters who surprise us in the most wonderful ways. To family, we all echoed. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with both my success and my relationships. Sometimes the best anniversary gift you can give your parents isn't an expensive weekend at a luxury resort. It's the gift of finally trusting them with the truth about who you've become.